Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Reconvened Ordinary Council meeting, which was originally commenced on Tuesday, the 24th of February. As many of you know, I adjourned the meeting on 24 February at 11:19 p.m. To be reconvened now, so I declare the meeting open at 6 p.m. Attendances, Councillor Stephen Russell is an apology for tonight and there are no approved leaves of absence. When we adjourned last week, we had just completed item 10.4.1, so we're about to move on to item 10.4.2. But before I do that, I'd like to extend a warm welcome to our new monitor, Ms. Gail McGowan. Welcome to you, Ms. McGowan. I'll now move to item 10.4.2, which is entitled Delegation DC 690, Local Planning Scheme number 7. There is an officer recommendation before us, but I understand that Councillor Howling also has an amendment to the substantive motion. Councillor Howling, I'm happy for you to have a go at just moving the amended delegation. A question, Councillor Razon?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just a question in relation to this amended motion. When I checked the hub earlier this afternoon, I didn't see that on there at that time, so I've only just received it. So I just am wondering, if you have any suggestions where there's no opportunity to consider the motion. Just in fairness to Councillor Howling, I just wanted to mention that in advance.
Yeah, I must confess that it only came to my attention reasonably late this afternoon. Ms Webstale, any guidance there?
You could stand down the matter, stand down the meeting pursuant to the standing orders and allow perhaps 10 minutes to review it. Or you could alter, move this item later and deal with the others and have a break then.
Well, councillors, if anyone wants to propose a motion maybe for a deferral or a brief adjournment, I'm open to it. I've had the opportunity to read it. I'm happy to speak to it, but I could understand if other people wanted a little bit of time to understand what they're voting on. Or failing that, I can just move the officer recommendation. I think Councillor Lee's put up a hand first.
I would just say, Mr Mayor, that there is quite an extensive number of changes and I don't think 10 minutes is going to be sufficient.
No, that's fair. Well, councillors, I'm in your hands. Does anyone want to move a motion to defer this item? Or, yes, Councillor Razon.
Yes, that would be my preference because it is quite detailed, involves some legal matters. So I would be in favour of moving a deferral of this item. All right, so councillors, Councillor Razon is moving a deferral of item 10.4.2 to the March Ordinary Council meeting. Councillor Brenda Brandis is seconding. Councillor Razon, if you'd like to give your reasons for the deferral, you may do so. Thank you, Mr Mayor. This is an important matter for the city, the scope of this delegation, and I appreciate that it's very important that we have the delegation put in place. In most cases, I probably would be in a position to look at this quite quickly, but I think there are a number of things, including the scope of the delegation, particularly on the last page, which I've had a look in relation to who this is delegated to, that I would probably need to look into. And I think that in the interest of good governance, it is important that something that's significant in this is carefully considered and that we have an adequate amount of time to review it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Razon. Now, councillors, as this is a procedural motion, there's no debate. We're simply putting the motion that item 10.4.2 be deferred to the March Ordinary Council meeting. Councillors, please cast your votes. And that was unanimous. So thank you, councillors. Item 10.4.2 is now deferred until the March Ordinary Council meeting. We move on to item 10.4.3, entitled Council Member, Committee Member and Candidate Code of Conduct. an absolute majority is required for this item. I haven't received any amended motions or alternative motions. Would someone like to move the officer recommendation? I will. Would anyone like to second it? Councillor Lees. Councillors, does anyone oppose this item? No? In that case, I'll declare it carried unanimously under our standing orders. We move on to item 10.4.5, entitled Metro Inner Development Assessment Panel. Councillors, we need a nomination for someone to serve as the alternate member of the Metro Inner Development Assessment Panel for the period of 27 January 2026 to 26 January 2028. I haven't received any formal nominations, but Councillor Raison, I understand you're interested in putting up your hand.
Yes, Mr Mayor, that's correct. And I have consulted with the other members of council as well in case anyone else was interested in putting their hand up. But I understand that I have their support in putting myself forward to be considered.
Thank you. Councillors, does anyone else also want to put up their hand? No? In that case, I'll move a motion in terms of the officer recommendation that Council nominates Councillor Jacqueline Raison as an alternate member of the Metro Inner Development Assessment Panel for the period 27 January 2026 to 26 January 2028. And paragraph 2 requests the Chief Executive Officer advise the Minister for Planning and Lands of the nomination of the City of South Perth's Development Assessment Panel alternate member for the period 27 January 2026 to 26 January 2028. Could I have a seconder, please? Councillor D'Souza, thank you. Councillors, does anyone oppose? No? In that case, I declare that carried unanimously under our standing orders. Okay. Moving on to item 10.4.6, entitled Urban Greening Advisory Group. Councillors, once again, at paragraph 3, we have the opportunity to appoint, I think, an unlimited number of elected members to the Urban Greening Advisory Group. I haven't received any formal nominations at this point in time, but I'll ask for some from the floor. Councillor Lees, first off the mark there. Would anyone else like to put up their hand? Councillor Brenda Abrandis? Anyone else? Councillor Howling? Anyone else? Going, gone. Okay. In that case, I move a motion in terms of the officer recommendation as follows, that Council, paragraph 1, supports the establishment of an Urban Greening Advisory Group, paragraph 2, endorses the terms of reference for the Urban Greening Advisory Group as provided at attachment A, and paragraph 3, appoints the following elected members to the Urban Greening Advisory Group, Councillor Kathy Lees, Councillor Andre Brenda Abrandis and Councillor Tim Howling. Could I have a seconder, please? Councillor Prendeville, thank you. Councillors, does anyone oppose? No. Okay, then that was carried unanimously pursuant to our standing orders. That brings us to item 11, which is applications for a leave of absence. Councillors, does anyone wish to submit a leave of absence application? Going, gone. Okay, that was easy. Moving on to item 12, which is motions of which previous notice has been given. The first one is item 12.1, entitled Notice of Motion, Mayoral Reporting from Councillor Tim Howling. Councillors, debate on item 12.1. This notice of motion was adjourned at the ordinary council meeting held on 16 December 2025. Prior to the adjournment, the notice of motion recommendation was moved by Councillor Howling and seconded by Councillor Waugh. I don't think anyone got as far as speaking on that item, so Councillor Howling, if you'd like to give your reasons for your notice of motion, you may do so now.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I'm not certain whether or not that was in fact moved. Can I seek a point of clarity? It's only by memory.
Ms Webster?
The minutes record that the item was moved by yourself and seconded by Councillor Waugh, and then during the debate, the mover yourself did not speak on the recommendation as discussion was had about adjourning the item. At this point in the debate, Councillor Lees moved a motion to adjourn the debate, seconded by Councillor Prendeville. So the view taken by the administration is that it has been moved and seconded, and you can continue and give your reasons from here.
Can I ask one more point of clarity, if I may, Mr Mayor? The suggested officer recommendation has now been included within the proposed agenda, which I don't recall having seen at the previous occasion, and it would accord with what I would wish to move.
So you're saying you want to move the suggested officer recommendation, not the notice of motion, your notice of motion appearing at page 109 at the agenda?
Yes, the suggested officer recommendation, which is an alternate, it may be procedurally correct to simply have the motion as previously stated, seconded, simply put, then lost, and then I can foreshadow that I'll be putting the suggested officer recommendation.
I might seek some clarity from governance on that. So the original notice of motion appearing at page 109 was moved and seconded and is currently live before us. Councillor Howling is now saying that he doesn't want to proceed with that notice of motion. He wants to proceed with the suggested officer recommendation appearing at page 114. Governance, what happens from here?
I don't believe that the recommendation by the officer, I don't believe it's an alternative motion. I believe it's an amended motion. It still has the same substance as your original recommendation, just pulled back. So I don't believe that it needs to be lost in order to be moved.
So is Councillor Howling amending his own notice of motion? All right. Councillor Howling, you're amending that. Councillor Waugh, you were the seconder. Do you agree? Yes? Okay. Councillor Howling, you may now proceed with your reasons.
And thank you to the governance officer for making that clear. At the meeting that we held, that this council held, which this council, of course, is a continuation of, that is the meeting which was dated October 2024, the council then decided that it would require a proposal, or the proposal was put and then carried, that the Mayor would make reports, and those reports were to be presenting a report of mayoral engagements and meetings attended by the Mayor in his or her capacity as Mayor since the last council meeting. And those reports were to include a summary of the events attended and persons met with by the Mayor in his capacity as Mayor, and further it stated and interactions with members of the community relevant to matters that have been or are likely to come before council. That's a necessary precondition to those reports. That is, that the matters that would come before council. And an overview of key issues and initiatives and matters that the Mayor has been addressing in his capacity as Mayor since that last council meeting. Now, there is nothing that says that that report needs to be orally given. Neither is there anything in that report that would suggest that any matter or any number of matters, not relevant particularly to council, should be reported to council. And for that reason, I agree with the amended motion, and that is to make very clear that the report given by the Mayor is in writing. And further, the report is relevant to matters that have been or are likely to come to council. And in my view, that's an important precondition, because with the greatest of respect, a number of the matters that we are hearing about and some members of the community attended and raised some concern about relate to those matters which are not relevant to the council, although the Mayor no doubt had attended and enjoyed certain activities on certain occasions, but do not touch on any matters that are relevant to any matters that have been or may come before the council. And it's for that reason that I adopt the proposed amended motion to give council the opportunity to receive a written report, to go back to the roots for why this motion was put and carried by the former council, although we're the continuation of that council, and to ensure that we are aware at the very least of those matters which are relevant to this council, but with the greatest of respect, not those matters which are irrelevant. It further gives the opportunity for the Mayor to at least identify those matters which are relevant to the second part of the motion, which the Mayor had said that he would, or that he reported on regularly. And that was in November, December 24, February, March, April, May, June, July, August and October 2025, where the Mayor then reported how elected members can work better with each other and with the city administration. Now, those reports were very brief in respect of what the Mayor was precisely doing in those respects, and a review of those minutes will indicate that there's very little detail that's been given. And it's for that reason that I would say that the proposed amended motion, that is that the Mayoral engage in some meetings attended by the Mayor in his or her capacity as Mayor since the last council meeting, and the summary of the events attended by the Mayor in his capacity, and those matters which are relevant to matters that have been or are likely to come before the council, as well as an overview of the key issues and initiatives, is not such a significant change from that which was previously being reported, but it ensures that only those matters in writing are given, that the Mayor ought properly to report which touches on the business of the council and not matters which are tangential to the council business, of which most members of the council may not be as interested in, albeit the fact that there is some interesting material in those meetings which are then reported. So it's getting back to the basics of what the motion was for, it's getting back to the basics of why we want to receive the reports, and it's getting back to those matters which, in my view, ought properly to be the subject of the intent of the requirement and the motion that was put and passed by this council in the first place. Those are my reasons.
Thank you, Councillor Howling. Councillor Waugh, you're the seconder. Would you like to speak?
I'd like to reserve, if I could, please, Mr Mayor.
All right. Councillors, is there anyone who would like to speak against the notice of motion? I will. So, councillors, first I think I need to correct Councillor Howling's characterisation of the resolution from the October 2024 Ordinary Council meeting. Paragraph 2A of that resolution says that my report is to include a summary of the events attended and persons met with by the Mayor in his or her capacity as Mayor since the last council meeting, comma, specifically noting interactions with members of the community relevant to matters that have been or are likely to come before council. That's not saying I only report on things relevant to matters that are likely to come before council. That's saying I've got to report on everything, but specifically noting interactions with members of the community relevant to matters that have been or are likely to come before council. So I don't quite agree with Councillor Howling's characterisation of the motion from October 2024, but there we are. I have some more fundamental misgivings about this notice of motion. Councillor Howling's motion makes reference to section 2.8 of the Local Government Act. And the reasons given by Councillor Howling say that the Mayor has a statutory duty to foster good relations between councillors. And councillors, that much is true. Section 2.8, subsection 1, subsection D of the Local Government Act says that a Mayor promotes, facilitates and supports positive and constructive working relationships among council members. But councillors, I can't do this alone. As a member of our community quite rightly said at the deputation in December, it is the responsibility of all councillors to help create and maintain good working relationships. And that is precisely why section 2.10, subsection 1, subsection D of the Local Government Act expressly provides that the role of a councillor includes facilitating and maintaining good working relationships with other councillors, the Mayor or President, and the CEO. So that's my first problem with this motion. It seems, maybe by implication at least, to place the sole responsibility for improving relations between councillors on the Mayor's shoulders, or at least imply that the Mayor bears a disproportionate share of that responsibility. There is nothing in the motion before us that reflects the responsibility of all councillors to facilitate and maintain good working relationships. My second problem with this motion is that the existing legal framework that I'm subject to prevents me from speaking openly about what might be impediments or barriers to improved relationships between councillors. Councillor Howling says that my comments in the past have been brief on this subject. Well, that's right, and there's some really good reasons for that. No matter how good a hypothetical mayor is, he or she cannot unilaterally deliver good relations among hypothetical councillors. And if a hypothetical mayor were forced to deliver a report of the kind that Councillor Howling is seeking, that hypothetical mayor would presumably have to report on any problems or obstacles that the hypothetical mayor had encountered in trying to foster good relations among councillors. Now, Clause 4 of the City of South Perth Councillor Code of Conduct says that elected members have to avoid damage to the reputation of the local government. And a hypothetical mayor might very well find it difficult to give a meaningful report to a council discussing potential impediments or barriers to improved relations between councillors without inadvertently damaging the reputation of the local government. Sometimes, and perhaps regrettably, the only practical way of dealing with issues between elected members is through the formal complaints process established by the Local Government Act. Sad but true, that's why it's there. But as we all know, Section 8, capital A, point 36 of the Local Government Act provides that individuals involved in a complaints process must not disclose or use any information about the existence or details of a complaint unless authorised to do so. Councillors, that's 5 minutes, so I'm going to interrupt myself. Would someone be kind enough to move a motion? Councillor Brenda Abrandis, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Lees. Councillors, please cast your votes on a motion that I be granted a further 5 minutes to speak. And that was unanimous. Thank you all for the indulgence. I'll try not to take all of it. So, if a hypothetical mayor, and councillors, I really must stress that I'm giving a hypothetical example here to illustrate my point. If a hypothetical mayor were to make public disclosure about complaints made or problems with the local government or issues between elected members, that mayor would be breaching either the Code of Conduct or Section 8, capital A, point 36 of the Local Government Act. So I don't really want to find myself in those shoes. My third problem with this motion is it's probably going to be really counterproductive to the actual goal of good working relationships between councillors. This motion attaches no weight to the responsibility on councillors under Section 2.10 of the Act to facilitate and maintain good working relationships with other councillors, the Mayor or President and the CEO. Instead, it places the Mayor in a situation where the Mayor has to make public reporting on matters that may very well carry nuance, sensitivity, or even differences of opinion among council members. And I suspect that any hypothetical council who goes down this path would very quickly find those very important relationships unravelling rather quickly. My fourth problem with this motion is that it fails to recognise that at the end of the day, my powers to compel good working relationships between councillors are actually rather limited. I can't direct staff, I can't direct councillors. No mayor or president can. And no mayor or president can single-handedly deliver good working relationships between councillors by themselves. No one can do that alone. And that is exactly why good working relationships and positive workplace culture is everyone's responsibility. Councillors, I really do think there are some very, very good reasons why no other local government, as far as I'm aware, requires reporting of the kind proposed by Councillor Howling from their mayor or president. If councillors have genuine concerns about the working relationships at the city, the appointment of the local government monitor gives us all an opportunity to address those concerns. And I would very gently suggest that doing so will be a much more productive way of dealing with those concerns than this motion. So, for those reasons, I will be voting against Councillor Howling's motion, and I will be supporting the alternative motion that Councillor Brenda Abrandis has produced and assume will be foreshadowing fairly shortly. Thank you, that's me. Is there anyone who would like to speak in favour of Councillor Howling's notice of motion? No. Is there anyone else who would like to speak against? I think Councillor Brenda Abrandis was first there. The floor is yours, Councillor Brenda Abrandis.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And as you've correctly noted, I would foreshadow my motion should this motion fail tonight. I am speaking against this notice of motion, primarily because it would make us the only local government that I understand in Western Australia to require this level of ongoing reporting, and also the additional scrutiny with regard to the extent that the Mayor is actually required to report back. It does cause me concern when the amount of time that it actually takes to actually prepare the reports and present them to council and also to local government does actually result in a significant impact on the community, when the time could be better spent asking questions or making deputations. A review of the comparable local governments, as I've mentioned, indicates that no other local government mandates that the presiding member present the mayoral report, including engagements and meetings attended by the Mayor. Council working well with the administration is the responsibility of everyone. No one person can carry this burden alone. The current presentation disclosure format undertaken since November 2024 does not add a significant value to the councillors or the community. A significant amount of time, as I'd mentioned earlier, is spent in the preparation of this report and the delivery of the presentation. In reviewing other local governments, comparatively, a significant number of the other local governments do provide a report back, but it's nothing by the way of the presentation or effectively trying to ensure that there are metrics and targets that are imposed upon the Mayor. For these reasons tonight, I consider the reporting is not necessary, as what we are achieving is still compliant with what is required to be undertaken by the Mayor under Section 2.8 and the related provisions of the Local Government Act. And that should be fostering the good relationship between the councillors and the Mayor. And again, it is incumbent upon all of us to actually engage with the Mayor should we need to. For these reasons tonight, I will not be supporting this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brenda Abrandis. Councillors, is there anyone who would like to speak in favour of the notice of motion? No. Is there anyone else who would like to speak against? Councillor Lees.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I will be very brief. So I won't be supporting the motion tonight. Yes, the Mayor has a role to promote, facilitate and support positive and constructive working relationships between council members, but I don't believe it is appropriate for the Mayor's efforts in this regard to be publicly reported. As councillors, we also each have a responsibility to maintain constructive and respectful relationships with one another, with the Mayor and with the CEO. But similarly, I do not believe it is appropriate for our individual or collective efforts or otherwise in this regard to be publicly reported. There is certainly a need for stronger working relations and better information sharing within the council, and I'm hopeful that with the support of the newly appointed Monitor Ms Gail McGowan, PSM, we can make meaningful progress in this area. But the motion before us is not appropriate, and I do not believe that it will help to support better working relationships, so I'm not going to be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lees. Councillors, is there anyone else who would like to speak either for or against who hasn't already spoken? Councillor Raison.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Councillors, for me, I think events have overtaken this notice of motion. As Councillor Lees has said, Ms Gail McGowan, PSM, was recently appointed as a monitor, and her role is to monitor the city's governance, relationship and decision-making processes and practices, including relationships between council members. In that role, Ms McGowan will also assist the city to develop an action plan, setting out any necessary governance and or, to quote exactly from the scope of her appointment, relationship improvements. This mayoral reporting hasn't really been on my radar in any particular way, but interestingly, after the notice of motion was published, I decided I would take soundings in the community, and without exception, I found that there was no particular support for the current mayoral report and the way that it's presented. Comments included the amount of meeting time, which I agree with personally, but ultimately we are here to serve the community. So if it benefited the community, I would be happy to sit through 15, 20 minutes of a report being read out. Of great significance to me when I went into the community was that I heard that there are members of our community who feel reluctant to meet with the Mayor in circumstances where their name and location of a meeting will be publicly read out and broadcast on YouTube. It's not something I'd thought about before, but it was referred back to me on a number of occasions. As you know, community engagement is a really important priority of my own, and I think that this is at odds with engaging with our community. And it seems unusual that members of our community can call the Mayor and talk over the phone without the need for any public disclosure. You could talk for hours. But if they meet, even for a small amount of time, to have a coffee or a general catch-up or an in-person get-together, then the person's name and the location of the meeting will be made available to the public. So this really did give me cause to think about this, balancing all things, and I think in the circumstances with the appointment of the monitor, we would be best served to wait and all participate in the development of that action plan. So I'll be voting against this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Raison. Councillors, is there anyone who would like to speak either for or against who hasn't already spoken? No. In that case, Councillor Howling, you have 5 minutes to rebut any arguments made during debate, if you would like to do so.
Thank you. Firstly, the proposed motion is not significantly different from that which had been proposed in October, so 2024, save and except for that it's proposed to be in writing. That's the first point. The second point is that the notice of motion which had been proposed in November 2025 was to encourage a greater degree of transparency around what is stated. That is, that the Mayor had repeatedly said his primary focus is on working how elected members can work better with each other. Any search of the meetings will show any search of the agendas as well as the minutes will show the meetings that did take place and the fact that there were certain councillors that were met with at certain periods of time. The motion that is before us relates directly to a special part of the role of Mayor included within clause 2.8. And it says in 2.81D to promote, facilitate and support. Now that is a different role from councillors individually, albeit the fact that we all bear responsibility in respect of positive, constructive working relationship among council members and then vis-a-vis the staff and in particular the Chief Executive Officer. It's in that respect that the motion as put in November, and I accept what Councillor Raison says, to an extent has been overtaken by the fact that now we do have a monitor who is able to assist in respect of ensuring that there is better relations. But councillors, community members who came forward were raising the fact that this was taking a long period of time and was taking up valuable council business, and for that reason I saw merit in it being in writing. I do not accept what the Mayor said, that he is here to correct what my understanding is of what is included in clause 1B, as was originally included within the motion passed in October 2024, and that is that the role of the Mayor is not to report about whether or not he's gone to a Montessori school for a graduation or a symphony in the park or a meeting which we all attended ourselves, but it's specifically noting interactions with members of the community relevant to matters that have been or are likely to come before council. Note that the wording is broad. That includes interactions with members of the community. Now, in my view, that qualifier makes very clear what the purpose of the motion that had been passed in October 2024 was, and the wording as amended is that it would be in writing and that those actions taken to promote, facilitate and support positive constructive working relationship amongst council and members at least be the subject of a degree of reporting. It need not be specific, but if there is a meeting, for example, that takes place where everybody can benefit from, for example, how we may be able to do certain things and what certain ideas that might have been put forward, why wouldn't that be in writing, circulated amongst all of us? We receive very detailed reports from the Chief Executive Officer, which assists us in our job. There is a role to be played by this motion, and anybody can search all of the minutes and find precisely what had been done. I do not accept the characterisation as given that it was not appropriate. With the greatest of respect, it is an appropriate motion. It is not inappropriate. It is appropriate because it touches on the fundamentals of governance. For that reason, I agree with the suggested officer's recommendation, and that is that it be a written report. Let me say this, that there are many councils where there is a report given by the presiding member at the commencement, but the formality and perhaps the level of detail is one of the concerns of matters that are not relevant to the operations of the council. And I know and can hear now that the Mayor has interpreted that very, very broadly, and I'm not certain whether or not that was the intent of council at the time. I am certain that they were not as interested in hearing about a range of other appointments that the Mayor had, but wanted to know about
30
those
seconds,
matters.
Councillor Howling.
Sorry? 30 seconds. Okay. But they wanted to know about those matters which were before the council, relevant to the business of the council. And so for that reason, the amendments proposed are minor in their nature from what had been passed in October 24 and serve the community well in the terms of transparency.
Thank you, Councillor Howling. So, councillors, I'm about to put Councillor Howling's notice of motion to the vote. Councillor Brenda Abrandis has foreshadowed his alternative motion. So if Councillor Howling's motion is carried, it's carried. If Councillor Howling's motion is not carried, I will invite Councillor Brenda Abrandis to move his alternative motion. With that, councillors, please cast your votes. All right, the votes are in. Those who voted in favour of Councillor Howling's notice of motion were Councillor Howling, Councillor Waugh, Councillor D'Souza and Councillor Prendeville. Those who voted against were Councillor Brenda Abrandis, Councillor Lees, Mayor Milner and Councillor Raison. That's a 4-4 split. In these circumstances, I have a casting vote. I'm casting it against Councillor Howling's notice of motion. The motion has failed. I now invite Councillor Brenda Abrandis to move his alternative motion.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to move my alternative motion 12.1 on Mayoral reporting.
If you'd like to read the text, and then I'll see about a seconder.
Great, thank you, Mr Mayor. The motion is as such, that Council resolves that 1, at each ordinary council meeting, the Mayor or Deputy Mayor, acting in the position of the Mayor, will not present a report of the mayoral engagements and meetings attended by the Mayor in the capacity as the Mayor since the last council meeting, and Roman numeral 2, the Chief Executive Officer be requested to prepare for the inclusion in the ordinary council meeting agenda a table of the Mayor's formal engagements, meetings and events attended in his capacity as Mayor since the previous ordinary council meeting. The format should be consistent with the concept, briefings and workshops disclosure as set out in the current meeting agendas.
Thank you, Councillor Brenda Abrandis. Councillors, would someone like to second Councillor Brenda Abrandis's? Councillor Lees, thank you. Councillor Brenda Abrandis, feel free to give your reasons now.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Lees. Reasons for this alternative are fairly simple and straightforward. A review of comparable local governments reveals that no other local government mandates that the presiding member present the report of mayoral engagements and meetings attended by the Mayor. Any benefits to the council or community from the mayoral report do not justify the amount of time the Mayor is required to devote to preparing the mayoral report, or the time consumed at the ordinary council meeting by the presentation of the mayoral report. As previously mentioned, the council working together with the administration is a responsibility for everyone, and no one person can carry this burden alone, and for this reason the reporting in its current format does not provide the carrying of that burden equitably. The disclosure of the Mayor's engagements as well do cause some concern with regard to the amount of disclosure that may need to be made, and understanding the confidentiality and the concerns amongst community members, and also the concerns amongst community members about the time taken with regard to the presentation of the report is a concern. A tabled disclosure reported at the OCM is consistent with the Mayor's statutory duty under section 2.8 and the related provisions of the Local Government Act 1995 to foster good relations between councillors and mayors. For these reasons, I would ask you to support a revised mayoral report. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Brenda Abrandis. Councillor Lees, you were the seconder. Would you like to speak?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll make it brief. As a number of us have raised tonight, including Councillor Howling, the current arrangement with an oral report at the start of the meetings is not appropriate in my, not adding value for the community, in my opinion. It's time consuming and little value add. I believe, so for this reason, I believe the requirements of the October 2024 resolution should be refined, and I believe that's what Councillor Brenda Abrandis's alternative motion is doing. The current practice of reading out a detailed report is time-consuming, offers limited value to the community. I believe a more appropriate approach would be, as suggested now in this alternative motion, for a list of formal engagements, meetings and events attended by the Mayor in his capacity as the Mayor to be an appendix to the agenda. The revised approach would simply require the administration to prepare a report based on the Mayor's diary, which should be neither difficult nor time-consuming. I would also like to suggest that councillors also have the opportunity to provide details of any relevant events or meetings they have attended in their capacity as councillors, so that these can be incorporated into the report. I believe this would support greater consistency and transparency. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lees. Councillors, would anyone like to speak against Councillor Brenda Abrandis's alternative motion? Councillor Howling?
Yes, thank you. I adopt the reasons which I previously stated, but I want to make clear the previous resolution, which has been adopted in October 2024, always provided the opportunity for a report to be given in writing. And as such, it was never done, but it's possible. Secondly, to place the responsibility for a Mayor's report onto the Chief Executive Officer is, with respect, not something which, in my view, is appropriate. What the council is seeking and the community, which we all speak to, is seeking is transparency. Now, I've heard what Councillor Brenda Brandis and I heard what Councillor Razon said earlier, and that is that they are hearing from their community that they speak to that they're concerned about the confidentiality. And as I understand, both Councillor Brenda Brandis as well as Councillor Razon, as I understand, are also receiving feedback from their community as to the time taken. Now, certainly, the time taken in respect of the report is lengthy within any meeting and takes away from valuable reporting time or work time for passing motions. So I have no difficulty with recommending that the report would be in writing. And for that reason, I would seek 2 amendments, and I would ask whether or not the mover is open to those 2 amendments. And that is that it be limited to, or remove the words the Chief Executive Officer at the beginning of the motion to the Mayor. And secondly, that the report be in writing and those matters be included within the proposed notice of amendment, notice of motion as an amendment. I say this in closing. The motion was excellent. It was intended to create transparency with the community. It worked. But unfortunately, it became laden and lengthy because, in at least my opinion, what was intended to be included, that is, those interactions with members of the community relevant to matters that have been or likely to come before council, became, with the greatest of respect, a little lost. And the problem with that, the report became lengthy and didn't then serve the purpose for which people are now saying we ought to get rid of it as a whole. I think that's an overreaction. We shouldn't get rid of it as a whole. We should ensure that it serves the purpose for which it was originally intended, and that is that the Mayor provide a transparent report so we all know what those matters are that are relevant to matters that are either before or have been before council, and so that we're all able to be properly kept up to date with what was going on. Now, previously, at least from what I recall listening to the meeting of October 2024 when this motion was passed, there were observations made by very experienced councillors who had been here for some period that they would like to know what was going on within the community, because sometimes they bump into people who tell them some things that have been happening and they're unaware. So it provided the mechanism by which there was appropriate forms of communication, as well as ensuring that council as a whole were kept up to date with the activities of the Mayor. And for that reason, I believe that it's a good motion with proper intent to serve governance well, which is intended to be a report provided by the Mayor to ensure the transparency. So there's 2 foreshadowed amendments. I can move those in just a moment. Mr Mayor, that's what I wish to say in respect to this motion.
Are you moving an amendment, Councillor Howling?
Thank you. Mr Mayor, I would propose to amend the wording in Roman numeral 2 from the Chief Executive Officer to the Mayor, and to include it to be in writing.
Wouldn't it necessarily be in writing if it's being included in the ordinary council meeting agenda? I think the answer is yes.
There's no other. Yes, I mean, there's no other way of including it in the council agenda, of course, Mr Mayor, other than it being in writing. So perhaps those words are redundant. So perhaps it only needs to be the Mayor be requested, and that's because it's part and parcel of the Mayor's role.
All right, that's your amendment?
Thank you, it is.
Okay, Councillor Howling has moved an amendment to paragraph 2 of the alternative motion, replacing the words Chief Executive Officer with Mayor. Does anyone wish to second that amendment? Councillor Prendeville, Councillor Howling, the floor is yours for your reasons.
Thank you. Very brief. It's the role of the Mayor to provide to the council information to enable the councillors themselves to carry out their functions and duties and responsibilities. This is not unusual, as has been suggested. This is a simple report that can be prepared in short periods of time, and if councillors required and requested further information, I'm sure that they could make contact to require that further information. But it assists councillors in carrying out their role if they know when the mayor is meeting with certain persons, what the nature of those meetings might be, and what is being done in respect of those particular meetings. It's served the council well since October 2024.
Councillor Howling, you're only speaking to the amendment. You're not speaking to the broader motion.
I realise that, and I think that the mayor should be the person, and I am only speaking to that amendment, and therefore I think it's the mayor that ought to do that task. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Howling. Councillor Prendeville, you're the seconder. Would you like to speak?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll be brief. As we have discussed this in length, and of course I accept whatever decision Council lands on this evening on mayoral reporting, and I'm grateful for the debate and to hear the differing views. I am a supporter of transparency and accountability, and I can imagine that we are all in a time of reflection on our duties, our relationships, our behaviour, and I've heard some really good comments this evening about the focus of all of us, all our elected members. Our focus needs to be on fostering positive relationships because at the core, we are all here for the same reasons, to be making good decisions for the future of our city. My main concern with Councillor Brenda O'Brandis' alternative motion this evening was similar, obviously, to Councillor Howling, was point 2. I had heard concerns earlier about workload that reporting might add to an individual. It doesn't make sense to me to shift this onto our new CEO. I'm not sure why the new CEO's workload should increase with something like this, albeit possibly not too onerous. But I don't think it's appropriate, and I am therefore supporting this current alternative. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Prendeville. Would anyone like to speak against the amendment? A question, Councillor Brenda O'Brandis?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. I have a question for the administration just with regard to Roman numeral 2. So I've included the Chief Executive Officer be requested to prepare for the inclusion. My understanding in doing so is that the tabling and the inclusion of all the notices of motion are prepared and orchestrated by the Chief Executive Officer. So my request as very standard and normal, along with everything else that the CEO includes within the agenda pack at the ordinary council meetings.
Thank you. Ms Webster?
Sorry, jumped the gun there. No, it would not be normal for the CEO to prepare a mayoral report. It would be normal for the CEO to include it in the bundle, but it would not, in my view, it would not be.
I guess I've got a follow-up question for that. I accept that it wouldn't be normal because I'm pretty sure no other local government in Western Australia does this. Are there any other local governments in Western Australia that compulsorily require a mayoral report?
I can't answer that without doing the research, and I also won't engage in the debate.
Thank you. All right. I'll speak against the amendment by Councillor Howling to Councillor Brenda O'Brandis' alternative motion. First and foremost, it's the role of the city administration to prepare the agendas, not elected members. I understand that the CEO's PA has access to my calendar. She would have visibility of the formal, just make sure I've got the words right, the formal engagement meetings and events attended by me in my capacity as mayor since the previous ordinary council meeting. I wouldn't think that was a terribly onerous burden to flick through 30 days and identify what formal meetings I'd attended. I don't see why the usual rule that the city administration prepares the agenda and the papers for the agenda should be displaced in this case. That's all I've got to say. Is there anyone who would like to speak in favour of the amendment who hasn't spoken yet? No. Is there anyone else who would like to speak against the amendment who hasn't spoken yet? Councillor Brenda Abrandis.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. For the same reasons I asked the question, I consider the compilation of the agenda pack plus all of the notices of motion to be presented and prepared by the Chief Executive Officer. As you've just indicated, the collation of the information should be fairly standard and straightforward, and to be probably no different from the collation of the committee meetings and attendances of the ordinary council members as well. So I don't consider this to be a change that is necessary, and it is something that would form part of the ordinary council meeting pack regardless, and the compilation of that is undertaken by the administration through the CEO. So I don't see any need to make a change to Roman numeral 2. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brenda Abrandis. Councillors, is there anyone who wishes to speak either for or against Councillor Howling's amendment? Councillor Lees, and if you can let us know if you're speaking for or against.
Against, sorry, Mr Mayor. Look, I just briefly wanted to say that by putting the Chief Executive Officer at the start there doesn't mean that the Chief Executive Officer herself will be writing the report. It means the administration will be writing the report, which does not seem onerous for me to, for an administration person to go through the Mayor's diary, and the CEO would be signing it off. So I think that's entirely reasonable.
Thank you, Councillor Lees. Councillors, is there anyone else who would like to speak? Either Councillor Raison, and if you can let us know if you're speaking for or against.
A question through you, Mr Mayor. I just would appreciate, the CEO's not here at the moment, but I just would, my understanding is that there is a calendar, because that's included in our bulletin, that includes the mayoral engagements. But I just would appreciate confirmation as to who administers that calendar, because obviously what you would be doing, whoever's putting this information across, would be extracting it from the calendar. So it seems logical that one person to do that is the person who also manages the calendar. So I just would appreciate the answer, is who manages the calendar? Do you put your mayoral engagements in there yourself, or is that through the Office of CEO?
I can answer from my point of view, and then in Ms Ledger's absence, I'll pass it over to Ms Webstale, but no, I don't get consulted prior to the preparation of the councillor calendar that appears in our bulletin. That I can only assume gets automatically extracted. Ms Webstale?
Sorry, I understood the question very differently to the Mayor's answer. I understood the question was whether the Executive Assistant puts the Mayor appointments into a calendar for him. Is that the question?
Did I misunderstand?
Well, there is a council calendar, as I understand it, that includes mayoral engagements, and
Yes.
it's
Not all
whether
of them.
you enter them or whether they're entered by the assistant to the CEO.
No, if you're referring to the council calendar that gets made available to councillors with the weekly bulletin, I have nothing to do with the writing of that. Ms Webstale?
If I may just add in there, so I think if we're basing it off the prior reporting structure that the Mayor has done and the items that he's put in his report, so the meetings that he has with constituents, that they're not in that calendar.
Sorry, I'll get Councillor Raison to clarify the question. Are you referring to the councillor calendar that the City Administration produces and makes available each week to the councillors through the councillor bulletin, or are you talking about the appointments that I disclose each month as part of the mayoral report?
As I understand this alternative motion, it's in relation to the Mayor's formal engagements, meetings and events, and that I understand that they are included in the council calendar that is published weekly in the bulletin, and they would be extracted from that. I'm just really looking at what is the most efficient way to make this happen, the extraction of information.
Most of them would be, certainly things like citizenship ceremonies, committee meetings, council agenda briefings, ordinary council meetings. I think, don't quote me on this, but maybe the regular scheduled meetings with WA Police and things like that. But there may be some that, that for whatever reason aren't picked up in the council calendar that goes out with the bulletin. Is that fair, Ms Webstale?
Yes, I think that's
Thank
a fair
you.
representation.
Thank you.
All All right. Is there anyone else who would like to speak either for or against the amendment by Councillor Howling to Councillor Brenda Abrandis's alternative motion who hasn't already spoken? No. Okay. Councillor Howling, you've got 5 minutes to wind up against any arguments made against your proposed amendment.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I don't intend to repeat what I had previously said. I'm just struggling at the moment to recall, and therefore I wish to go to a question.
You're in winding up now, Councillor Howling. Time for questions has passed.
Thank you. Rescinding a motion which is the practical effect of this motion, and that is to pass a motion which is substantially different from that which had been previously passed, in my view, changing it from the mayor who is required to transparently report what he has done, to imposing a requirement for the Chief Executive Officer to make a report, misses the point entirely of such reports. I do not agree with the characterisation that there are no councils that do this. This is a regular practice, not only of local government, it's actually a regular practice of most corporations where the chairperson will give a brief account in respect of those matters which touch on the good governance of that particular organisation. It's occurred in companies, it's occurred on association boards that I've been part of, and it is simply a matter that should be welcomed. But it must be those matters which touch on the importance of the good governance of the district, and transparently doing so is not only important from governance perspective, but also consistent with our roles and responsibilities. For that reason, insofar as this substantially changes and is substantially different from what has been previously passed in October, to change the emphasis of the reporting requirement from the Mayor to the Chief Executive Officer, it may well be in breach of the requirements of the regulations, but more importantly, it fails in the test of what we're trying to achieve, and that is good transparency, fair decision making, where we know what the Mayor's doing, we know who he's meeting with, and we know when he's meeting with them and why. That is consistent with good governance, because if the Mayor is meeting with one or another developer, we should know about it.
Councillor Howling, please keep your comments relevant to the actual amendment before the floor. What you're talking to is the difference between Mayor or Chief Executive Officer at paragraph 2. Please don't go beyond that.
With the greatest respect, that's precisely what I'm addressing.
No, it wasn't, Councillor Howling. Please confine your comments to the amendment.
I accept your ruling, but let me say this.
No, Councillor Howling. No, can I say this? Please just speak to the amendment before the floor.
With the greatest respect, that's precisely what I was proceeding to do.
Then do so. Thank you.
I finished. Thank you.
All right. So, councillors, I'm about to put Councillor Howling's amended motion to the vote. It's an amendment to Councillor Brenda Abrandis's alternative motion. If it succeeds, the words Chief Executive Officer get changed to Mayor. If it fails, the words remain Chief Executive Officer. But either way, then we go back to the substantive alternative motion, either amended or unamended as a result of this vote. Please cast your votes. All right. So Councillor Howling's amendment has passed 5 votes to 3. Those in favour were Councillor De Souza, Councillor Howling, Councillor Prendeville, Councillor Raison and Councillor Waugh. Those against were Councillor Brenda Abrandis, Councillor Lees and Mayor Milner. The alternative motion has now been amended at paragraph 2, where the words Chief Executive Officer previously appeared, the word Mayor now appears. Okay, so Councillor Brenda Abrandis, Councillor Lees, and I have, did I speak on that one? Yeah, I think I did. All right. Is there anyone else who would like to speak either for or against the alternative motion who hasn't spoken yet? Councillor Waugh.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. When I moved the original mayoral reporting motion in October 2024, it was about one simple principle, and that is transparency. It was passed unanimously, and I also understand that our former mayor may have also presented a report. Whether that was required or not, I am unclear. I did hear you in your speech, Mr. Mayor, that it was not a terribly onerous burden. It was about ensuring that both the council and the community could see clearly and consistently the engagements undertaken in the capacity of the mayor between meetings. And that principle remains important, and I'm pleased that no one in this chamber is seeking to step away from that. What is being proposed tonight is not the removal of transparency, but it's a refinement of how that transparency is delivered. We have a full-time mayor, and having our mayor prepare a structured table of formal engagements that will ensure consistency, accuracy and clarity, and removing unnecessary narrative and ensuring that what is presented is factual, concise and easily understood by both council and the community. Good governance evolves. Sometimes we introduce a reform to embed a principle, and once that principle is accepted, we refine that mechanism to make it more efficient and streamlined. For me, what matters is that the mayoral engagements remain a standing item on the agenda and on the public record. That accountability remains so that the community can continue to see where representation is occurring and in what capacity. I appreciate the amendment that Councillor Howling has put, and my reason for appreciating that is because the role of the council is separate and distinct from the role of the administration, and so I do find it appropriate that the mayor would report in his capacity as a member of council. Perhaps in time we can gather further feedback and again address amendments as appropriate as to the impact and the ongoing requirements. If this format achieves what was intended in a clearer and more structured way, then I am very comfortable in supporting it. Because transparency is not about personalities, it's about systems, and I'm pleased that we are continuing to strengthen that system. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Waugh. Councillors, is there anyone else who would like to speak either for or against the alternative motion who hasn't already spoken? Councillor Raison.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm speaking in favour of the alternative motion, and I would like to make some broad comments. And the first comment is that I think this entire process illustrates for us what happens when we're trying to make these kind of decisions, which are ultimately collective decisions in the chamber, where a motion is brought initially with the intention, and I don't question the intentions behind this, but I just say as a matter of fact that a motion is brought in the first instance to improve relations. Then there's a variation on that following the officer's recommendation, which I understand. Then we have an alternative motion. It is no surprise to anybody looking at the way a process like this unfolds from a governance point of view, why it is that we may in fact have a monitor here. This is a really unproductive and not a constructive way to collaborate, in my opinion. So I will be supporting it as an interim step, but ultimately I just don't think this is the way that these things should come about.
Thank you, Councillor Raison. Councillors, is there anyone who would like to speak for or against the alternative motion who hasn't already spoken? I might say a few gentle words. I checked my notes. I did speak to the original motion and I did speak to Councillor Howling's amendment, but I haven't actually spoken to the alternative motion yet. And I really support what Councillor Raison has said. She expressed it very, very well. Councillors, I think there's a really good reason why since October 2024, no other local government in Western Australia has gone down this path. As far as I'm aware, we are the only local government that forces their mayor to make a mandatory mayoral report each month instead of simply granting their mayor a discretion to announce any matters of relevance, which the administration has identified several examples of at pages 110, 111 and 112 of the agenda papers. And I don't know what our community thinks when they see motions like this and debate like this, when we've got lots of other things that would be much more beneficial to our community to be getting on with. It's probably not good. I thank Councillor Brenda Abrandis for the alternative motion. I must confess, having to prepare the mayoral report in the previous format was pretty onerous and did take me a large chunk of time, often when I was wrestling with a pretty substantial agenda. This month's agenda, for example, just to pick a recent one, was about 950 pages in length, so it does take time. Hopefully this is much more simplified and much less onerous, being consistent with the way that concept briefings and workshop disclosures are set out. So I am going to support Councillor Brenda Abrandis's alternative motion, but I do hope we see less of these kind of motions going forward. That's all I've got to say. Councillors, is there anyone else who would like to speak either for or against the alternative motion? No? Councillor Brenda Abrandis, you have 5 minutes to wind up if there's anything you'd like to say in rebuttal to arguments made during the debate.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll keep it fairly brief. This alternative motion does provide governance, integrity, accountability and transparency. It still requires the disclosure of a table reported in the ordinary council meetings, and this is consistent with the Mayor's statutory duty under section 2.8 and the related provisions of the Local Government Act. It is incumbent upon elected members to also engage with the Mayor with regard to any matters that they consider important that may be disclosed. A review of 14 local governments identified that most of the local governments do have mayoral reporting, which is comprising of meeting attendances by the President or the Mayor, as well as announcements that are included in minutes for discussion. Other councils prepare a list of events that have been attended by the presiding member, and some include those disclosures on their website. There are no other local governments that I'm aware of that have this onerous reporting. This evening, I present this alternative motion in good faith to try to streamline the reporting, to lessen the impact on both community and also the elected members, and consider this as a part of a de-escalation process. I encourage councillors to support this alternative motion tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brenda Abrandis. Councillors, I'm now putting the amended alternative motion to the vote. Please cast your votes. All right, so the votes are in. Those who voted in favour of the amended alternative motion were Councillor Brenda Abrandis, Councillor D'Souza, Councillor Lees, Mayor Milner, Councillor Prendeville, Councillor Raison and Councillor Waugh. Those against were Councillor Howling. Okay. We now move on to item 12.2, which is a notice of motion entitled Review of the City's Foreshore Strategy and Management Plan from Councillor Jacqueline Raison. Councillor Raison, would you like to move your notice of motion?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Review of the City's Foreshore Strategy and Management Plan. That Council requests the CEO to commence a review of the City's Foreshore Strategy and Management Plan 2015, which is called the Plan, which will result in a report to Council by the end of September 2026 that summarises 1. How the plan is tracking in terms of implementation. 2. Whether there have been any unintended outcomes and the financial and or social impact of those outcomes. 3. Whether there have been any outcomes that have not been able to be achieved and why.
Thank you, Councillor Raison. Would someone like to second this motion? Councillor Lees? Councillor Raison, the floor is yours for your reasons.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The South Perth Foreshore is iconically beautiful on a world scale, and our city is one of its key stewards. In 2012, the city began a visioning process to guide future activities and development along the foreshore. The overarching vision was to revitalise the foreshore. After extensive stakeholder engagement, the current South Perth Foreshore Strategy and Management Plan was adopted in 2015. Preparation of that plan aligned with the development of the city's 10-year strategic plan. Since then, we have seen a flourishing of activity and nature along the foreshore, and I would like to thank everyone who has played a part in bringing the original strategic vision to life. Recently, as a council, we began discussions in relation to the city's next 10-year strategic plan, which is 2026 to 2036. So it is timely for council to receive a report on the outcomes to date of the 2015 Foreshore Strategy and Management Plan. Caring for and developing the foreshore is a balancing act, and a number of recent community issues in Mill Point Ward have put a spotlight on some of the challenges that we face. And now is an opportune time for us to take stock and look at how we are balancing the competing demands for use and the developments of this regional reserve, with the need to conserve and enhance a functional, healthy river and foreshore environment. The strategy itself sets out the fundamental why and what for the development of the South Perth foreshore. This is important when future decisions in relation to the foreshore are being considered. And while community engagement has been undertaken for specific projects along the way, the 2015 strategy does need to evolve with the times, because over the past decade we've had major changes in the way that we live, work and play. The shifts include a significant increase in working from home, senior members of our community being supported to live at home as they age, increased density and development, increased expectations from the state government in relation to the development and expansion of tourism precincts, increased focus on the importance of connecting with nature and living well, and increased stakeholder and community focus on environmental issues. There have also been in recent years a number of legislative changes to the scope of matters that we as a council need to consider in our decision making and strategic planning. At the time it was prepared, it was noticed that the city did not have sufficient funding for the effective management and replacement of assets on the foreshore. Some of the issues that were identified at the time included high water use, ageing reticulation infrastructure, water quality problems associated with artificial lakes, turf management, lack of biodiversity, lack of shade, and deteriorating river walls. To begin addressing these issues, the management plan has 4 whole of foreshore strategies and 10 individual node strategies. Each strategy has action items to enable us as a council to proactively consider whether any adjustments need to be made. Are there any levers that we need to pull in relation to the development of the foreshore? First, we need to understand the progress that has been made. Then, of course, we need to consider the future development against the backdrop of the wider needs of the entire district. So the purpose of this notice of motion is to ask the administration to undertake a review of the status of all the action items from that 2015 strategy and report back to council. And in the interests of organisational learning and transparency, the report will consider whether implementation of the strategy has led to any unintended outcomes and the financial or social impact of those outcomes. The timeframe for delivery of the report is the end of September and was arrived at in consultation with the CEO. The estimated amount of time required to prepare that report is between 40 and 50 hours of administrative time, which I think seems reasonable given the scope and the importance of this part of our beautiful city and the significance to our community and the wider community, and I commend this motion to you.
Thank you, Councillor Raison. Councillor Lees, you're the seconder. Would you like to speak?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, I'll be very brief. So I support this notice of motion. The South Perth Foreshore Strategy and Management Plan was adopted in 2015. So 11 years ago, and since then both circumstances and community expectations have shifted. A number of issues have arisen on the foreshore in recent times, which have attracted considerable community attention and concern, and more will inevitably continue to emerge. I'm not convinced the current plan reflects contemporary thinking or provides the clarity needed to guide the administration and council in our decision making. I believe a review now at this time is timely, and given the importance and value of this stretch of foreshore, I don't consider the cost involved to be unreasonable. So I support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lees. Councillors, is there anyone who would like to speak against the notice of motion? No? Is there anyone else who would like to speak in favour? Councillor Brenda Abrandis.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll keep it very brief. I think this is a very timely motion and I commend Councillor Raison for raising this. It's quite important that we actually consider, our number one asset, the South Perth Foreshore, and all the infrastructure and everything that we're planning over the next few years. Thank you. I support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Brenda Brandis. Councillors, is there anyone else who would like to speak either for or against? No? There's been no debate against, so no need to invite Councillor Raison to wind up. I'll simply put item 12.2 to the vote. Councillors, please cast your votes. And we're missing, oh, yes, Councillor Waugh. Okay, so that was unanimous. That was 7 votes in favour, yes. Okay, so moving on to item 12.3. But before I do, Ms Webster, I'm conscious that the CEO's been absent for about half an hour now. Is everything okay?
I'm sitting in the meeting with you. I think it's best we just progress. I can't
All right.
add to that.
I'll do that. Okay, so we're on to item 12.3, which is a notice of motion entitled Financial Sustainability Strategy. Councillor Raison, would you like to move your motion?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The notice of motion, Financial Sustainability Strategy. That Council requests the CEO to develop and deliver a report to Council by 30 June 2026 that outlines options for strengthening the city's finances, including identifying non-ratepayer alternative sources of revenue, strengthening the city's long-term financial plan and strategies for optimising rate revenue.
Thank you, Councillor Raison. Councillors, would anyone like to second this motion? Councillor Lees. Councillor Raison, the floor is yours for your reasons.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Like many local governments in Western Australia, our city is facing ongoing pressures that require prudent financial stewardship. The combination of growing and diverse community needs, high service expectations, ageing infrastructure and cost escalation in construction requires strong oversight and strategic consideration. As the recent Challenger Reserve costings and the construction costs for the Coode Street toilets and change rooms have shown us, our city needs to prioritise growing our revenue base to enable us to continue to meet the needs of our community and visitors. Improving financial sustainability usually requires a mix of revenue reform, cost control, asset management and governance improvements. Our city needs to consider developing a financial sustainability strategy that includes options for growing non-ratepayer revenue. We are predominantly a residential city, but nevertheless, all avenues do need to be explored in detail. It's an important strategic issue which may have a significant impact on the scope of services that our city can provide and the rates which members of our community are asked to pay. The report requested is aimed at providing Council with information on 1, as the notice of motion says, the current sources of revenue, which include rates, fees and charges and grants. 2, identifying non-ratepayer sources of revenue. And 3, strategies for optimising rate revenue. To be clear, this means making the most of the revenue that we do receive and looking into other potential sources of rate revenue, such as differential rates for vacant land. The CEO has confirmed that this report can be prepared within the current budget by 30 June 2026, and I commend this motion to you.
Thank you, Councillor Raison. Councillor Lees, you're the seconder. Would you like to speak?
Yes, just briefly, Mr Mayor, thank you. As Councillor Raison has indicated, the city, like many local governments across WA, is facing sustained financial pressures. Costs continue to rise, our population is growing, and the community's expectations of service delivery are not diminishing. This is a significant strategic issue. The decisions we make now will directly influence the scope of services the city can continue to provide for future generations and the level of rates our community will be asked to pay. We need to approach this with clear thinking and smart, responsible financial stewardship, looking at all opportunities with equal weight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lees. Councillors, would anyone like to speak against the notice of motion? Councillor D'Souza.
Not against, Mr Mayor. I'd like to move an amendment, if I may.
What's your amendment, Councillor D'Souza?
The amendment is to delete point 3 of Councillor Raison's motion.
All right. Does anyone want to second that motion? Councillor Prendeville. Councillor D'Souza, if you'd like to give your reasons for that amendment.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I thank Councillor Raison for bringing this important motion, and I have had numerous conversations with her about trying to settle potential wording so we wouldn't have to have an amendment, but I guess we just have a difference of opinion, so that's fine. I just thought I'd bring the amendment, and this is in no way a reflection of Councillor Raison, who I commend for her attention to this issue. So my concern with dot point 3 is I just feel it's too broadly worded. And these are for two key reasons. The first reason is it diverges from the strategies we already have on the books. So page 23 of our Strategic Community Plan 2024 already covers this. So if you go to point 4.2, if you go to item 4.3.2 of that plan, it already says diversify and optimise non-rate revenue. And 4.3.3 of our Strategic Community Plan says we should maintain a culture of fiscal efficiency. So I have no issues with points 1 and point 2 because they're already largely covered, but point 3 I think is treading new ground, and it is a divergence from the strategies we have on our books. The second reason I'm opposed to the third dot point of Councillor Raison's motion is I think it risks sending the wrong signal to the community and to the administration about potentially increasing residential rates. Now, I'm not saying that's anyone's intent. I'm saying the way the third dot point is drafted, it doesn't give me sufficient comfort to support that. So I've been a supporter of diversifying revenue away from residential rates for my entire time on council. A few years ago, we had a discussion around bus shelter advertising, which I was a strong supporter of. So I think we have made some good wins in that area, and we can continue to do so. But I just think the wording of that dot point is a bit too broad, and I think we already have a specific provision in our strategic community plan, which covers diversification of revenue away from rate revenue. So for those reasons, I'll be moving this amendment, and I encourage you to support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor D'Souza. Councillor Prendeville, you're the seconder of the amendment. Would you like to speak?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just very briefly, I would like to commend Councillor Raison for this motion and the previous ones. The potential results are really quite exciting, I think, to all of us, and I know that she has committed time and energy into investigating and preparing these. I appreciate her openness with Council in regards to her motions and reasons. Whilst I appreciate the intent behind this motion, I do agree with Councillor D'Souza's points that he's spoken about just for point 3. I'm hoping we can continue discussions around optimisation through budget workshops happening soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Prendeville. Councillors, would anyone like to speak against the proposed amendment? Councillor Raison.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Councillor D'Souza. It has been helpful to bounce off ideas with you. The reason that this third dot point was included, firstly, it was included in consultation with the CEO, including the selection of the language, and that word optimise is there, meaning to make the best of or the most effective use of rate revenue. The reason that I won't be supporting the amendment is I do want a very wide net to be cast here in terms of potential strategies. That's not the same as raising rates. So I see that ideas that have been suggested, like potentially looking at differential rates for vacant residential land, would be captured by the third bullet point and would not be covered by the first one because it only covers non-rate payer sources of revenue. So that was the intention, was to include that, to ensure that all possibilities are explored, but certainly not to raise or, to set any direction in terms of increasing rates.
Thank you, Councillor Raison. Councillors, is there anyone who would like to speak in favour of the amendment?
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Howling.
And thank you for the discussion. I do think that there is a difference between the optimisation of minimum rates as is proposed and the diversification of rates. The diversification, of course, is a different process. Optimising rates is a problem because there's a legislative requirement in the process by which we adopt, set and pass the rates. There has been, as quite correctly pointed out in the last annual report, an idea of looking for ways in which vacant property could be differently rated. Those are sometimes good ideas, but that's certainly on the agenda already. I'm concerned if looking for optimisation of rate revenue is to be done before June 2026. It's a relatively short period of time, bearing in mind that we're now in March. And the way within which that's able to be achieved previously was identified as a process. It was adopted by the council, as I understand, through the annual report, and that has not been done. So it's a matter that is in play until June 2026 already. It's something that's there, it's something that's available to be done, and perhaps we should wait until we set the new budget for a motion such as this in considering how to optimise the rate revenue consistent with that required by the legislation in the way in which rates are struck, met and set for the community.
Thank you, Councillor Howling. Councillors, is there anyone who would like to speak against the amendment who hasn't spoken? Councillor Brenda Abrandis.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm speaking against the amendment as I consider a strategy for optimising revenue to be highly appropriate. This is a process that we will be engaging through the budget workshops over the next 3 or 4 months. What does concern me is that removing strategies for optimising revenue doesn't take into account other things other than rates. And I know we've spoken about rates and differential rating tonight, but the optimising of revenue can come in many different forms. So it could be commercial investments, partnering, it could be working with the state government. So I think the importance of comment 3 is quite appropriate and should be also applied in conjunction with considering whether rates need to have any differential type rating. The CEO has confirmed, obviously having a discussion with Councillor Raison previously, that this motion is acceptable and is workable, I understand, and it does not cause any grief or concern. So I do not see the need to remove something which is quite important to the overall funding strategy process for the city, and I don't support the removal of strategies for optimising revenue. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brenda Abrandis. Councillors, is there anyone who would like to speak in favour of the amendment who hasn't already spoken? Is there anyone else who would like to speak against? I will. I understand where Councillor De Souza is coming from. Our community can be sensitive to potential rate rises, but it's one thing to ask the CEO to provide us with a report, including strategies for optimising rate revenue. It's another thing to actually pass a budget with a certain level of rates increases. I'm interested, I'm always interested in hearing new ideas about how we can do better. Just because I've heard a new idea doesn't mean I'll automatically adopt it, but either way, I'd rather have the information than not. So I'm happy with the notice of motion as it stands. I'll be voting against the amendment. Councillors, is there anyone who would like to speak either for or against the amendment who hasn't already spoken? No? Councillor De Souza, if there's anything you'd like to say in winding up, now's your opportunity.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, I'll be brief. Once again, I think this is an important motion and discussion to have, and I think you can see from the debate today, it's produced different points of view, which I think is a good thing. So again, I thank Councillor Raison for that. I did try to potentially chat with Councillor Raison about the third dot point, putting the word non-rate before revenue. But I think the concern was mentioned by Councillor Brenda Abrandis and Councillor Raison about not capturing differential rates, which, look, fair enough. No particular strong views on that I thought that would be more appropriate for discussion through the budget workshops. But I'll just sort of reinstate the point that I think the key word here is optimise, and I obviously concede optimise means effective use of resources, but I think the thing is who decides what effective use of resources is. And if there is a proposal, for example, hypothetically only, from the administration that their view to optimise resources was to fund a certain program, we have to increase rates. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I just think we should be very cognizant of guarding against broader wording, and if we wanted to include things like differential rates, that should be explicitly included. And so for those reasons, I'll be supporting this amendment and encourage council support. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councillor D'Souza. Councillors, I'm putting Councillor D'Souza's amendment to the vote. Please cast your votes. All right, so the votes are in. Those who voted in favour of Councillor D'Souza's amendment were Councillor D'Souza, Councillor Howling and Councillor Prendeville. Those who voted against were Councillor Brenda Abrandis, Councillor Lees, Mayor Milner and Councillor Raison. So the amendment has failed. We now go back to the unamended item 12.3. Councillor Raison has spoken, Councillor Lees has spoken. Would anyone like to speak against the unamended notice of motion? No? Would anyone else like to speak in favour?
Sorry, I'm intending to speak against. Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Please proceed.
The process by which Council adopts its budget is through a series of workshops, and as we have recently been requested, to provide our view as to what might be required by our particular community. And for that reason, the process is transparent together with the administration. It usually involves a workshop. It usually involves a report on precisely those matters which are included. Arguably, the very extensive and new Chief Executive Officer KPIs which have been set have in fact included broadly these types of financial reporting requirements. And it's so for that reason that we can be proud that we have some of the most extensive KPIs that have been ever set for a local government Chief Executive Officer, doing precisely what the work of the motion is intended. Collaboration and working together, that is through workshops which we're used to, having ideas and speaking openly in respect of those ideas, respectfully, meaningfully, and in a considered way, is the way within which we set the budget, or this budget has been set in the past, as I've noted, and in my view is a proper way within which the budget could be adopted for the future. For example, identifying non-ratepayer alternative sources of revenue. Now that's a matter that we need to have some careful consideration about. It's not just one person that's going to be able to present an idea or two. And it's matters that we need to think about really seriously so that we don't end up engaging in anti-competitive behaviour or engaging in activities which are not appropriate for the purposes of the way within which we do business.
Councillor Howling, you might be getting slightly off point. I don't think anyone's suggesting we engage in anti-competitive behaviour. Perhaps if we can keep it relevant to the notice of motion before us.
Mr Mayor, I can go into further detail. The motion identifying non-ratepayer alternative revenue, what I'm saying is that that's best done within a workshop. I appreciate the interruption, but in a workshop...
Councillor Howling, I'm not querying that part of what you said. I'm querying the references to anti-competitive behaviour. But please continue.
The workshop is the best place within which we're able to throw around ideas and ensure that those ideas see the light of day. Those ideas need to be tested and critically analysed. And there is a raft of legislation against which they need to be tested. Secondly, strengthening the city's long-term financial plan. We have a long-term financial plan. And it's a great plan that we can all review, read, and have input on, and we can amend through a process of a workshop. Again, collaboration. So if there is any further optimisation other than that which had been identified in the annual budget of 25-26, then it would be somewhat of a surprise, perhaps repeating that which is contained within the workshop of, the annual budget of 25-26, But the CEO at the moment doesn't need more work. And that's what this motion is doing. We can get on with doing our business in the usual way by having discussions and collaborating with the administration. And that's what I'm encouraging Council to do. And for that reason, I'm voting against this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Howling. Councillors, is there anyone who would like to speak either for or against the notice of motion who hasn't already spoken? I'll speak, but I'll keep it very short. The notice of motion is requesting a report. I don't think requesting a report undermines collaboration. I don't think requesting a report undermines the usual budget processes. I'd quite like to see the information in that report, so I'll be supporting the notice of motion. Would anyone else like to speak either for or against? No? Councillor Raison, if there's anything you'd like to say by way of winding up in rebuttal to arguments made during the debate, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I certainly agree with Councillor Howling. Ideas need to be tested and ideas need to be analysed. First, we need to generate the ideas in order to achieve both of those things. And that is the very purpose of this notice of motion. After discussing this matter with the CEO, who I understand also has a particular interest in expanding the possible revenue sources for the city to ensure that rates ideally do not increase unnecessarily, we worked through the possibility and the timing of this report coming. I would expect that once we get the report and ideas are generated for us, that we will robustly test those ideas and possibly also discuss them in a workshop. It is simply a starting point, and of course this is something that could have been dealt with administratively, but I also feel it's very important to bring the community along with us if we are going to start raising scenarios like investing in property and a number of other matters. And that is why I've brought this to the floor at this meeting, so that it can be discussed and the community can be involved. And I appreciate everybody's input in relation to this, and I commend this first step to you all.
Thank you, Councillor Raison. Councillors, I'm putting item 12.3 to the vote. Please cast your votes. All right, so the votes are in. Those in favour were Councillor Brenda Abrandis, Councillor Lees, Mayor Milner, Councillor Prendeville and Councillor Raison. Those against were Councillor Howling and Councillor De Souza. Item 12.3 has passed. We now move on to item 13, which is questions from members. Item 13.1 is responses to previous questions from members taken on notice. Responses to questions from members taken on notice at the December 2025 Ordinary Council meeting can be found in the appendix of this agenda. That brings us to item 13.2, questions from members. Councillors, are there any questions from members for the administration? Councillor De Souza.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. We received and tabled a petition last week, this meeting I think, to seek administration advice to upgrade the Waterford entry statement. Could I just have two questions? Firstly, is there any indication on when a report back to Council will occur? And secondly, whether funds can be set aside for this, for discussion in budget workshops for the upcoming budget?
Thank you, Councillor De Souza. Who should I direct that to, folks? Ms Amprimo?
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. So I would anticipate that we would consider that in budget workshops before the report would come back, just given the timing of budget workshops, and Council can consider some options. We'll present them and include them for Council's consideration. I think, though, if I recall correctly, Council did consider this in last year's budget workshops as well.
Thank you, Ms Amprimo. Any further questions, councillors? Councillor Lees.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I have some questions around the polyphagous shot hole borer. So at the annual electors meeting, it was stated that more than 5,700 trees, so around 18% of the trees recorded in the city's database are rated as having high or extreme species susceptibility to the borer. Am I correct in understanding that the database does not include all trees on city managed land, particularly those in bushland areas? And if so, does the city have an estimate of total number of trees on city-owned and managed land, and can it extrapolate how many of these might fall into the high or extreme susceptibility categories based on the 18% figure?
Ms Ampremo, should I send that in your direction?
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you for the question. So, yes, you're correct that not all the city's trees are contained within the tree database. We don't have an estimate on the total number of trees or their species. However, we are monitoring the technology available for aerial surveillance and assessment of number of trees. And when we believe that's cost effective, we would seek to pursue that method of assessing the canopy that we don't already have recorded.
Thank you, Ms Ampremo. Councillor Lees, another question?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. So to understand the extent of the problem and the risk the city is faced with, can the city provide an estimate of how much it would cost to remove 5,700 trees and replace 5,700 trees?
Ms Ampremo?
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. So the cost does vary depending on the location and size of the tree. So things like accessibility to the tree and whether traffic management is required. But as part of the development of the urban greening strategy, we did prepare some figures for guidance for the general public. And if I use those figures for consistency, I think it works out at around $14 million for those trees to remove them and replace them. But obviously that is a very broad estimate because it would depend on the exact location of the tree.
Thank you, Ms Ampremo. Councillor Lees?
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Director Ampremo, for that answer. What programs and actions is the city implementing or proposing to implement to manage and limit the spread of the shot hole borer on city managed land? And what support is proposed to be provided to help private landowners address those infestations?
Thank you, Councillor Lees. Ms Ampremo?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. So the city has no dedicated funding relating to the PSHB response since that was transferred from DPIRD through the from the eradicate to manage phase. And it's currently undertaking minimal activities within the scope of the existing operating budgets. The city does participate, though, in the DPIRD training, the Welga Working Group and the Perth Inner City Working Group on PSHB. Support for PSHB response on private property is available through the state government tree bait scheme, I think it was called, for planting on private property. But other than that, the city doesn't provide any support for private property tree management.
Thank you, Ms Ampremo. Councillor Lees?
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Director Ampremo. So following on from that, you've probably answered the question about trapping activities, and there's no budget for that at the moment, so that's not occurring. Would the city support trapping, as some other councils are doing?
Ms Ampremo?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So you're correct, we aren't currently doing trapping. The reason that DPIRD was doing trapping was to identify the areas that PSHB was active and also the level of activity. That was a tool that was primarily used to track the spread of it from the initial zone and as it moved out in the metropolitan area. I am aware that some other local governments are doing trapping. However, given that we know it's here, we know it's within our district, I wouldn't really consider it the best use of our resources. I think there's other things that we can be doing if we're allocating funds to it, because we know it's here. We don't really need to trap to know that it's within the district.
Thank you, Ms Ampremo. Councillors, any further questions for the administration? Councillor Raison, did I see a hand go up there? Councillor Howling?
Thank you. Just a question firstly. I had sent a series of written questions for which I received answers. Can I ask that those be incorporated within the minutes or?
Yes, they will be incorporated within the minutes.
Thank you.
I might ask what those questions are.
There's some questions from Councillor Lees, and there's some questions from Councillor Howling, and there's some questions from Councillor Brandis.
All right. Councillors, any further questions? I think Councillor Lees was first.
So as mentioned, I had put in some further questions. So my next one is about the Ranger e-bike. At the annual electors meeting, questions were asked about the use of the e-bike the city procured for the Rangers to use. As the city administration able to explain the limited use of the e-bike with only 310 kilometres on the odometer?
Ms Webster?
Thank you. I believe a picture of the bike may have been distributed, but it's not a traditional e-bike. It is a e-bike that has been customised in order to have a large container on it to carry the Rangers' items. I'm not sure that what that's meant is it's incredibly difficult to ride and manoeuvre. So I will distribute a photo if you haven't seen it, and that will clearly explain perhaps the reluctance of the Rangers to use it. Some of them found it very difficult to manoeuvre. The city is currently looking at the asset's future and whether we can repurpose it, sell it, use it in a different area, all those options. So it is being looked into.
Thank you, Ms Webster. Councillor Brenda Brandis?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I have a couple of questions with regard to the Royal Perth Golf Course and following on from part one of last week's Ordinary Council meeting. The report indicated that the city would be providing trees with regard to the replacement for lost trees, and for the 24-25 year includes 68 trees and 500 native shrubs, and also for the 28-year program around about 308 trees and 8,150 native shrubs. Can the administration please advise to what extent the Royal Perth Golf Course will be obtaining trees and vegetation from our nursery, and would it be at reasonable rates or commercial rates?
Ms Webster?
We'll need to take that one on notice.
Ms Ambrema?
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. So we get orders from them each year, and they are charged the rates at which we charge other local governments for our plants. So they're charged the same as anyone else who's purchasing from the nursery.
Thank you, Ms Ambrema. Councillor Brenda Radis?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Director Amprimo. Again, a follow-on question from last week's part one of the Ordinary Council meeting with regard to the Royal Perth Golf Course. There was obviously quite a bit of community interest with regard to the loss of trees. Since that last meeting through to today, has the Royal Perth Golf Course had any conversations with the administration just identifying what species of trees would be planted, taking into mind black cockatoos in the area for feeding, roosting, foraging, and also the possums in the area? And the second question would be, have they since committed to any flora or wildlife survey with regard to the golf course?
I might step in on that one, Councillor Brenda Brandis. Certainly the first question could arguably be considered to be potentially reopening discussion on a council decision made last week, but still on this meeting. But of course, there's nothing stopping you asking that question offline. I just don't think I can allow it here. Yeah. Any further questions, councillors? No. Okay. Oh, Councillor Raison.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm happy for this question to be taken on notice. I've been receiving a lot of inquiries from members of the community in relation to the St Joseph's Convent site going on the market, and the questions relate to the heritage status in terms of the site-specific survey that was to be undertaken. So my question in that context is, has that survey been done, and when is that report likely to come to council for consideration of our own heritage list?
Ms Mullen?
Thank you, through the chair. All of the reviews have been undertaken in accordance with the October 25 ordinary meeting of council, so all the places have been reviewed. It's anticipated the report will be considered at the March round of meetings of council. notwithstanding that particular property is on the State Heritage list of properties, so it is State Heritage listed. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Mullen. And Councillor Lees.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I have a question in relation to Collier Reserve. So as part of the correspondence and deputations regarding the Collier Reserve's change room tender item last week, several residents have requested tree planting around the perimeter of the reserve. Could the city advise whether perimeter tree planting is included in this year's tree planting program at the reserve, and how this location ranks with the city's planting priorities, bearing in mind that the planting would have been within this current budget, I'm assuming, because it'll commence before June?
Ms Ann Primer.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. So we wouldn't generally start a great deal of planting before the end of the financial year. We may start some. We certainly wouldn't do any planting there, and whether we manage to get any done within this winter's planting season will depend on the timing of the other works in the area, particularly the undergrounding of the power lines there. And we would be able to accommodate some degree of planting if the other works permit in terms of the planting time window.
Thank you, Ms Ann Primer. I might ask a couple of questions myself, and I guess they're to Ms Webster. In previous years, the city has considered an item relating to the mid-year budget review at the February Ordinary Council meeting. Obviously, it wasn't on the agenda for this month, but will a similar item be raised at the March Ordinary Council meeting in respect of the 2025/2026 mid-year budget review?
Yes, as per the email that the administration has already sent to yourself, it is legislatively required to be considered before the 31st of March, which means that, yes, it will appear at the March meeting as already confirmed.
Thank you very much. And I appreciate that there's not much of a segue to the next question, but I'll accept the irony. The meeting papers for tonight and last week's meeting, inclusive of the confidential attachments, the confidential agenda, total over 950 pages. Completely appreciate the hard work of the city staff in putting together the reports and the papers, but it is difficult for elected members and maybe also for our community to get across so much information in what is ultimately a relatively short period of time between the release of the agenda and the actual meeting. Is there any scope to reduce the size of meeting papers for future council meetings?
I don't think that's an appropriate question for myself to answer or to be asked. The job of the administration is not to decide whether a report should go up or not. If a matter needs attention, it needs to be put in the agenda. It's not for the administration to say to somebody, sorry, there's 10 other matters, yours has to wait. It's just not an appropriate question.
Thank you for your response. Any further questions, councillors? Councillor Lees?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I only have two more questions, I'm sorry. Royal Perth Golf Course. So given the consent decision last week, and given the city has been appointed to manage the land by the Crown, what measures will the city be taking to ensure that the club complies with the environmental legislation such as the Biodiversity Conservation Act, the Environmental Protection Act, and the Environmental Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act?
I think I've got to make the same call in respect of that question. It could be seen as potentially reopening debate on item 10.4.1, but once again, you can certainly ask that question offline. I just can't allow it at this meeting.
They are separate approvals to the consent given.
Ms Webster?
We could take it on notice and consider the question when I've heard it back. It was quite a long question.
Okay.
Once it's typed out, we can go from there.
Okay. I have another question in relation to the golf course, but I'm happy for you to take it on notice. There were some, in the vegetation management plan that the golf club submitted and they're now required to comply with. I'm just wondering how the city will ensure compliance with some of the matters that they've said they've would undertake, including protection of vegetation during construction. So they talked about soil stockpiling and fencing, etc. And pre-clearing surveys with ecologists on site to ensure that trees with hollows or nests would be flagged and fauna encouraged to leave, and then clearing supervision with ecologists capturing and relocating fauna. I'm just wondering how we police that, or how the city is intending to police that, sorry.
I think that might fall onto the same category, but I'll seek Ms Websdale's guidance.
Look, it's very difficult to answer long questions on the hop.
Yeah.
Even just to take that all in now is difficult.
Sure.
So look, we can take it on notice, but if it does touch on Section 8.14, which is reopening discussion on council decisions, then at that point I would ask that the CEO be given the right not to.
Well, my intention is just to understand how the city will ensure compliance.
Okay,
with
look,
the
we'll take it on
consent.
notice if we
Yep.
could. Thank you. Appreciation is given if we can have as many questions in advance. It is very difficult, as I'm sure you would all appreciate, like getting a large agenda, to sit here after having been here since 9 o'clock this morning and get quite complex questions. It is very helpful to get them in advance.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ms Websdale. Any further questions, councillors? No. Okay. That takes us to item 14, which is new business of an urgent nature introduced by decision of the meeting. That's nil for this evening. And item 15 is meeting closed to the public. And there is an item on the confidential agenda for this evening, folks. So thank you for your attendance, but we will have to close the doors and go offline at this point. For those who are listening via YouTube, we're about to go into closed session. We will come back to close the meeting, but that will literally be just to close the meeting, so you're probably not missing much if you log off now. So I'll wait for governance to confirm that we're offline and that the doors are closed. All right. So for those who are listening via YouTube, Council has just concluded item 15.1.1 and the officer recommendation was carried unanimously. That brings us to item 16, which is closure. I would like to thank everyone for their attendance and participation this evening. I declare the meeting closed at 8:47 p.m. Thank you all and good night.